Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Joe, you talk a lot about how important music is to the people in Ukraine, and it must have made you smile yesterday when Secretary of State Blinken ended his surprise trip to Kyiv by jumping on stage with a band doing a cover of Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World. Did you hear it?
Joe. Little Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine, Frank.
I did, Bob, indeed. And in fact, the bar where Secretary Blinken was performing yesterday is called Barman Diktat, or the Barman Dictates. And it's one of my favorite bars in Kyiv since before the full-scale invasion. It's underground, and in the first several months in 2022, right after Russia's big invasion, that bar was because it's underground, was a great nexus of volunteers. People were living there, and it was kind of a mini fortress. And so it's a sign of progress to see the U.S. Secretary of State there singing there with local musicians. As I looked at the video, and I did not yet have a chance to talk with my friends who work there. But as I look at the video, it was not an open crowd. There was a U.S. ambassador, and it was obviously for security reasons by U.S. standards. It was not the regulars there. But it's been a big topic today throughout Ukraine because people have different perspectives on it. I think Ukrainians were very frustrated by that, and people who support Ukraine who are not in the country told everyone who was here, who was complaining, to kind of lighten up. Anthony Blinken's working hard for Ukraine, as he has, and he's got to let off some steam. So that was the attitude of pro-Ukraine people outside of Ukraine. But for Ukrainians and for foreigners here, they were frustrated because yesterday, as President Zelensky was meeting with Secretary Blinken, and as Secretary Blinken was playing the guitar and singing this old sort of nostalgic Soviet era, music that evokes ideas of rebellion against the Soviets, Kharkiv city was getting absolutely pounded. It was really one of the worst days in Kharkiv because there was at least six separate attacks by the Russians. So multiple missiles hitting 6 different times throughout the day. This is not, in all my time in Kharkiv, I've never experienced that. And it's absolutely intense and brutal. My friend of mine in Kharkiv, who works with us on delivering supplies to the front, if you look at the Guardian newspaper from the UK today, you can see my friend there walking through the rubble of a parking lot. He was going there to take pictures and to document what the Russians have done. And he and his wife just had a baby the other day in that city, not far from where that attack happened. So people are holding on there, but it is, it's difficult. And it's because Kharkiv is largely unprotected. There's no Patriot missile system from the U.S. to protect it. And it's sort of been forgotten. And that's the point that President Zelensky was making yesterday. And if you look at there's been a lot of debate and discussion. How did the Russians, seemingly pretty easily enter into Ukrainian territory north of Kharkiv region? And there's videos that have emerged. You can see the Russians simply walking directly, just walking, like almost leisurely over the border. And one of the key things here is that, Ukraine has not been permitted to use American weapons or American-produced weapons, no matter who donates those weapons, to hit targets on Russian soil. And so the Ukrainian fortifications that the Ukrainians have been preparing for many months, originally there was criticism saying, well, why didn't you put the fortifications at the border? But as I talked with guys who were there fighting, these days, it's very intense, and checking in to find out what the situation is. Why were these fortifications, several miles in, sort of away from the border? And the answer I'm hearing from most people is this very simple reality that that the Ukrainians could not use these weapons, including the new weapons that have arrived from the U.S., to hit anything across the border. So basically, they had to cede that territory in order to be able to attack the invading Russians. And so this does seem to be the clear reality there, and why it was so easy. Sort of in a sense, Ukrainians knew it was going to be easy for Russians to cross that line. But now that the Russians are in Ukrainian territory, the Ukrainians can hit them with these American weapons. And so because of this sticking point in this situation, I think for many people here, seeing Secretary Blinken singing that song, "Rockin' in the Free World," it does carry such nostalgia about the fall of the Soviet Union, and we see that that hasn't changed. And I think if you look at in war and you study Winston Churchill in World War II, optics are extremely important. And there was something almost for everyone here. It's almost like I hate to say it, but I had the feeling of a requiem there in Kyiv, knowing that Kyiv is protected, but that Kharkiv is almost forgotten and ignored. And, a powerful move would have been for Secretary of State to, if he wanted to play the guitar, to go to Kharkiv.
Yeah.
Imagine how that would have changed things. And so that's what people had wished for. And so that's sort of the, you can see how emotionally this, you see different perspectives on this, even among people who support Ukraine.
Interesting to note that on this day in 1988, the Soviet Union began the process of withdrawing troops from Afghanistan more than 8 years after Soviet forces entered the country. Hearing 8 years must give you pause for thought, Joe.
Yeah, all of this is, the Russians, began this current invasion of Ukraine 10 years ago. And now, we're in the third year of this full scale war. And it's, in a way, it just becomes normal life, even for the people who are here and trying to get through it. But it's, we've seen, looking at, on the positive side, looking at the fact that the U.S. Secretary of State could perform in Kyiv on the stage is a sign that things can be better, because no one would have thought that in 2022, I think, So that's the great hope here. But I'd say we are in it's days of very strange and heavy feeling. Another thing, in 3 days is the day when all Ukrainian men who are not currently registered with the military, they have, it's sort of like the day of no return. They have, I don't know if I lost you there. It's about May 18th. Anyone who's not registered in the military has to do it, or you start to lose some rights. So it's a very, people are afraid to travel. People who are not in the military and who don't feel ready for it are afraid to travel and move around. You have that, so that you have that sort of heaviness happening. Of course, very, very difficult situations, at the front. Meanwhile, some good news. I want to thank a listener, Mr. Peter. It's his birthday today, and he personally has helped support the purchase of many vehicles and drones and night visions to help with evacuations, to help with medics and search and rescue. And so a great WGN listener who's done so much to help Ukraine. And you still see this continued resolve, people all over the world, and even the great foreigners going to Kharkiv now to do everything they can to help rescue people, to help evacuate, and simply to be there in solidarity, even as this city continues to get pounded.
Thanks for the support to all. And thanks to you, Joe. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?